Welcome to Autism Approved, brought to you by Enzymedica. Now here's your host, Kristen Selby-Gonzalez.
Hi, and welcome to Autism Approved. I'm your host, Kristen Selby-Gonzalez. Right now, we are currently in Tampa, Florida, where the National Autism Association is having their yearly conference. We have the honor and privilege to talk to one of their speakers, Chantal, and she's going to be telling us about all of her great work and how she began in this journey, just like many of us. So thank you for being here.
Thank you for inviting me.
Well, very excited. Before we started taping, we were talking about all these great things that you're doing and these projects that you're doing, but what really led you to be the person you are today? Because I know you're an educator, a writer, a mentor, you're a powerful advocate for autism. I mean, I don't know where you get all the energy, but I know you're out there doing so many things. What led you to, I guess, the inspiration behind all the work you do?
Well, there's a couple of things. Not many people know this, but what I first did when I lived in California was that I worked with young adolescents and adults who were in state hospitals and who were going to be deinstitutionalized. So after the passage of the Lanterman Act, which is a law that gave the rights to people to live in their own community who had developmental disabilities, provided the funding for that, I was hired and I helped to teach for 2 years the first group that were going to be living in group homes.
Wow.
So that was my first experience with autism. And then I moved to Europe because my family's from France and I wanted to get to know my relatives. And I had my son Jeremy, who's now 22 and severely impacted with autism. And over there was not that much information, and back then too, because you realize this is 22 years ago. And I thought, you know what, it can't be that hard to get information, because that made everything so much harder, having to spend all the time getting the information. So that's what started me writing the books. Then my first book won this outstanding literary award from the Autism Society of America. And then I got asked to start speaking around the country, and I haven't looked back since.
Wow. Now tell us a little bit about, I heard that Jeremy was diagnosed when he was in another country, and there wasn't a lot being offered there, right?
Right. So Jeremy was born in Paris, and I recognized early on that he had some developmental delay. And I hadn't really recognized the autism because he was looking and he wasn't doing that much of the little stemming and things like that, but he wasn't moving very much. But once he started learning how to walk and to crawl, which I had to teach him with the help of a physical therapist, he got up and followed the pattern in the rug.
Wow.
He didn't go to mom or dad. So I said, okay, nobody's going to tell me this kid doesn't have a little autism.
Absolutely.
But in France, they weren't using the A word.
What were they thinking?
Well, because they considered autism back then to be a mental illness and not a developmental disability. So for Jeremy, in order for Jeremy to receive physical therapy and occupational therapy, we had to agree to see a psychoanalyst because that's how they treated autism. And at my first session and my second session, I went alone. The third, with Jeremy. The third session, my husband came, and I was so glad because I actually had a witness. It was like a Woody Allen moment because Jeremy was playing with two little round objects, and one of them fell, and the psychoanalyst was like, "Mrs. Sicile-Kira, did you breastfeed your child? Oh my gosh, look, he's lost your breast, he's lost your breast."
Oh my
and
gosh.
I instinctively grabbed mine. Say, no, they're still there. But the whole analysis continued on the fact that I had stopped my breastfeeding too early, or,
it was almost like the refrigerator mother.
Exactly.
Wow.
And so when we got out of there, my husband and I laughed so hard at first. But then it really upset me because I thought, I know better. But all the parents that don't know anything about autism that are hearing this crap from professionals, that's what got me started saying, you know what, I have to write books. I have to get information out. This is terrible to make parents feel so guilty.
That it's our fault in some odd way that
Exactly.
our child has this.
Exactly.
Oh my goodness. So now, how did you start your journey and where to go from there? Because I know you did something called rapid prompting method, or rapid
Right.
prompting method, yes.
Okay.
Some of you guys might have heard it as RPM. If you've heard that, it's the same thing. I know Soma does a lot of that work.
That's right.
So how did you, how did you first find out about that, especially being where you were at?
Well, I just want to mention that, like many parents, we tried many different things, and we had an ABA home program which helped. We did some biomedical, which back then was just diet. There wasn't really the biomedical
Well, thank
stuff
goodness there was
now.
something, though, right?
Right, but I just tried the things that made sense for my son, like auditory integration training, things like that, because I think that's a big important thing, is that people need to know to look at their child and then look at what's available and see if there's something that kind of connects with what makes sense. And so when I was writing my first book, autism spectrum disorders, I came upon the rapid prompting method. And so I went up to LA, because I live in San Diego, and I visited Soma teaching a classroom of kids, and then I met with Portia Iverson, who is a co-founder of Cure Autism Now, because they had brought Soma over. And it just made sense to me with Jeremy's motor difficulties. So RPM is a method where first you're teaching academics, but eventually it can turn into communication. So what it is it's under the tell and then ask paradigm, which many teachers use, which is you read a paragraph or you give them a few pieces of information, and then you ask questions only on information that's just been given to them. And so you build upon that over time. And so I found out that Soma was taking private clients, and this is before she had her organization that she has now in Texas. And so twice a month for a year and a half, I took Jeremy up to LA. So, and then I would practice every day with him for like 20 minutes. It was a lot less stressful than 40 hours of ABA. But for Jeremy, it was a way that opened up communication for him.
He's because if you guys don't know what she's talking about, from what I know about it, he points to the letters.
Correct.
And then that he spells the words, correct?
Correct.
Okay, and so what was the first thing that he spelled for you?
Well, the thing is that it's not a miracle, and it's over time. So first he was doing basic spelling of, one-word answers from choices that she gave him of information that she wrote to him. But the first things that he said completely unprompted, meaning that it wasn't in reply to a question, was about the fact that he wanted to have friends.
Oh.
Yes.
And how old was he when that happened?
Maybe 14 or 15.
My goodness, and he had no verbal communication at that
He had
point?
some verbal. With discrete trial teaching, I'd been able to teach him, like to label 125 objects. And then with PECS, PECS had given him the sentence. But I think it's because of all his muscle control issues, he was never able to put together more than 3 or 4 syllables.
Okay.
So he can still say some words, but he can't carry on a whole conversation.
Okay, and so when he said he wanted to have friends, how did that feel for you?
Well, it's like this, it kind of broke my heart in a way, and also it was a little bit of disbelief for me because I had used a lot of ABA, I had worked in a state hospital, and people used to talk about how, there's people locked up inside, and I thought, that's kind of like hokey, like, it's obvious or not obvious what they know, and it's not true. I know for my son now, from the things that he writes at school, that he writes at home, that he writes wherever, that there's so much that we don't know. And that just because someone is not able to express themselves does not mean they have nothing to say.
Absolutely, because we talk about that a lot, of trying to unlock the intelligence. We know it's
Correct.
there. And when we start hearing people talk for the first time, whether it be through, pointing to the letters, or some people are now writing on the laptops, or,
Right.
There's different devices.
Right.
It's amazing what I hear parents say that their children are saying. It doesn't matter if they're 13 or 22 or 52. They want to get things out.
Right. And the thing is, people think, they just all of a sudden learned this. They don't. My son expressively tells many times about the fact that everything he does today is built on things in the past. And he talks about how I used to read to him every day, that helped make sense to him to put the words with the pictures. He used to hear noises, but he didn't realize until one day he looked at me and he saw my mouth moving, that the words were coming out of my mouth and that was speech.
Wow.
And then it wasn't until he had auditory integration training that he realized that those sounds meant something, and that's when he understood that Jeremy was his name and that he could really hear and understand words. And I know this from watching him behaviorally, because before auditory integration training, you could say Jeremy, he wouldn't even look. And immediately after that, after 2 days, he started turning his head when we called his name. And then if there was a machine going on in the kitchen that signaled food was being prepared, he'd come into the kitchen. So he was able to hear, to process then. So that's the impetus behind my autismcollege.com that I'm creating, where people can go for information, because I think parents need to have lots of information and figure out what really works for them and their child.
Well, let's go into Autism College. Exactly what is that? Can we define that to the viewers out there that may have not heard of it?
Right. Okay, so autismcollege.com is my new website, and I've called it Autism College because people can go there to get educated about autism. So it looks like a college on a college website, and there's right now a lot of free webinars and a library of information, and there's a blog. There's also a newsletter. But what's going to happen over the next few months is there's going to be online trainings and conferences, so people who can't get to conferences such as this one can actually, from their living room, hear experts and actually type in questions and get responses. Also, I'm going to be creating a forum there because the information right now that I'm speaking a lot about, because I've just written a book about it, is the transition to adulthood. And in researching for this book, I found there's a lot of people who are doing great things, and we need to share all that information because everyone's nervous about what's going to happen when these